Gemar Chatima Tova. The diplomat in Jerusalem could barely contain his excitement, well aware that Israeli soldiers were being pilloried for their efforts in Gaza. The video he had just received could help change the public perception, maybe not for good, but even one day of positive headlines would be nice. Amidst the rubble of a destroyed building in Gaza, the video showed a group of Israeli soldiers. The IDF soldiers were told by a commanding officer that despite being under the threat of fire, they needed to dig through the rubble in order to rescue a little Palestinian girl who had gotten caught up in all of it and was now buried in the ruins. They quickly went to work, and the soldiers were able to hold off the Hamas terrorists long enough to give them the time necessary to pull the girl out alive. The diplomat told a group of us that after seeing the video, he reached out to a friend who worked as an officer in the army in public relations and excitedly told him about the heroic soldiers. Sorry, the officer told the diplomat, we can't use something like that. The implication was clear, the diplomat explained to us. Israel did not want to publicize anything but strength and power. After October 7th, when Israel looked vulnerable and weak, the only message that Israel wanted to send was the following: don't mess with us or else. If we pause long enough to think about it, there's kind of a sad zero-sum game calculus to it all. In the West, Israel loses support when it exerts power, but is the very same exertion of power in the East that evokes fear and demands respect. After October 7th, both the Israeli government and public largely agreed it was more critical for Israel to be feared in the East than loved in the West. Following October 7th, Israel needed to reestablish military deterrence, as the diplomat with the video was reminded. For much of Israel's existence, a doctrine of deterrence has been critical to the Jewish state's survival. In his autobiographical memoir, A Tale of Love and Darkness, the celebrated Israeli author Amos Oz recalls that on the night of November 29th, 1947, when the UN General Assembly paved the way for the birth of the state by passing the partition plan, after an evening of dancing and celebration in the streets, Oz's father crawled up next to him in bed. Oz's father whispered to the future author that when he had been a small boy in Poland, anti-Semites at his school had ganged up on him and stolen his pants. When his father, Amos's grandfather, went to the school to complain, the mob had grown, attacking him too, and stealing his pants as well. After sharing the humiliating story with the young Amos, with tears in his eyes, his father promised the following: bullies may well bother you at school or on the street someday, but from now on, from the moment we have our own state, you will never be bullied just because you are a Jew. Not that, Never again. From tonight, that's finished here forever. Wherever Jews came from, Poland, Russia, Yemen, Iraq, Ethiopia, or Persia, that message has been part of the Israeli national identity. We will never be humiliated again. We will not be victims. Mess with us and look out. Throughout the years, the doctrine of deterrence has served us well, helping us survive and even arguably leading to peace agreements with Egypt, Jordan, and now a host of other countries in the Abraham Accords. But on the morning of October 7th, 2 years ago, so much was lost, including Israel's deterrence. Everyone agreed the harsh reality that the country was surrounded by emboldened radicals singularly focused on destroying the Jewish state could no longer be ignored or tolerated. And therefore, with determination as fierce as ever, Israel showed its power, decapitating Hamas leadership in Gaza while humbling Hezbollah in Lebanon as the neighboring Syrian regime crumbled. With these victories, the doctrine of deterrence was slowly reestablished, something that was celebrated by the Israeli left and right. Then early in the summer, when the war broke out with Iran, the overwhelming sentiment in Israel was consistent. Even if it comes at a high price, even at a cost of hundreds or chas v'chalila, thousands of casualties, Israel needed to defang the regime in Iran. The Iranian regime had funded, trained, and supported the ring of terror around Israel for close to 20 years, and Israel was determined to deal with the root of the problem directly. Even at a great cost, Israeli society was determined that the doctrine of deterrence had to be reestablished. As we know, the Iranian missiles from this summer were largely unsuccessful, and Israel quickly claimed military dominance. The Israeli public's professed tolerance for potential civilian loss was not put to the test. Thank God for the Iron Dome and American military assistance. But there have been other costs to all this war. Loss of life in Israel and in Gaza, injured and battle-weary soldiers, and of course, the hostages. On the political front, we're witnessing the eruption of anti-Semitism in the West, struggling with the moral quagmire of how to wage the war in Gaza, and watching as the war is instrumentalized by fanatics from within Israel to shamelessly call for Arab subjugation and expulsion. And of course, today, everyone wants to talk about the Trump plan and whether it can work. These are all important issues to discuss. But today I want to ask a different question. Not a political one, but a spiritual question. When maintaining the doctrine of deterrence is critical for our survival, when it is necessary to consistently and repeatedly remind the world, especially our immediate neighbors, don't mess with us or else, what is the cost to Israel's soul? I wondered about this just the other month at our family Shabbat dinner. With two of my boys recently having decided to spend significant time in Israel, I told them that if they were to ever decide to fight in the IDF, I would be so very proud. One of my sons paused and asked, "Why did you mention that you would be proud for us to fight for Israel instead of telling us how proud you would be for us to live in Israel?" That's something that I've thought a lot about. And I believe the way I prioritized army service over living in Israel has something to do with the spiritual price paid for what has rightfully demanded our attention these past 2 years. The very first thing I listen to in the morning, every morning, is a news broadcast from Israel. And this is how it begins. Welcome to the Times of Israel Daily Briefing. Today is Wednesday, October 1st, day 726 of the war. No matter where you sit on any of the surrounding issues, when for 726 days we define ourselves by war, there's a price to be paid. 2 years ago, on October 7th, Israel, the proud startup nation, became a victimized nation. And then Israel quickly rediscovered its need to be a warrior nation, leading Jewish philosophers like Daniel Hartman to wonder, can we still be a peaceful nation? I shared these thoughts with a friend of mine, Dr. Ken Stein, a leading scholar on Israel who just retired from Emory. I told Dr. Stein that I was concerned that defense, war, and deterrence cannot exclusively shape Israel's identity, and he quickly bit back. As perhaps the world's leading scholar on Israel's peace agreement with Egypt, Dr. Stein said, "That all sounds nice, Brian, but do you think a Palestinian version of Anwar Sadat will suddenly emerge from the West Bank and make peace with us?" Stein's political point was clear and one that I largely agree with. For many years, we did everything we could to convince ourselves that certain Palestinian leaders would emerge as partners for peace, following the mold of the Egyptian Prime Minister Sadat. And that approach quite literally blew up in Israel's face. I told Dr. Stein that he misunderstood what I was suggesting. My hope to talk about peace is not because I expect the next Sadat to walk through the door, but because if the next Sadat were to ever come around, I want us to be ready to hold the door open. Circumstances force us to be a warrior nation, but we are ideologically committed to attempt to be a peaceful nation. We cannot afford to forfeit that critical part of our spiritual DNA, because if all we talk about is war, that is all we will ever be able to do. We need to remain open to possibilities other than war, not because we expect more from others, but because we want something more for us and for them. Remember that our ancestors, Isaac and Rebekah, had twin boys. One of those twins was Esau, a strong man's man. When blessing him, Esau's father, Isaac, foretold that Esau was destined to live by the sword. V'al karbcha tichiyeh. The other twin was Jacob. He had a different fate than the militant Esau, and Jacob became Israel, our forefather. We are different from Esau. At times we need to survive by the sword, but we are not destined to live by it. With hatred for Jews festering and disdain for Israel growing, it feels like the world is closing in, and the only thing we can do is lift our sword. And at times such as that, we need to remember that as Jews, we can simultaneously hold the sword to protect our bodies while holding on to the ideal of peace to protect our souls. I'm not saying it's easy. Remember, I'm the one who talked to my kids about serving in the IDF instead of the blessing of living in Israel. When war is thrust upon you, thinking about anything different is difficult, maybe nearly impossible. According to the Midrash, after the Israelites leave Egypt and head home throughout the 40-year journey, they are consistently threatened by surrounding kingdoms. They become so used to war, even God assumes its eventuality. And when the Israelites encounter Sihon, the king of Heshbon, assuming that war is once again the only option, God roars, engage him in battle, v'hikar bo milchama. But Moses doesn't listen. Instead, Moses sends Sihon messengers of peace. Sihon rejects the peaceful overture, and the Israelites pick up arms and defeat him in battle. While war was ultimately necessary, the Midrash teaches that Moses was correct to first try peace, and bravely asserts that God was mistaken to assume that there needed to be war. Because even when we're likely facing war, we must always hold out for the possibility of peace. War may be necessary, but peace is preferred. It's a lesson so difficult, even God needs reminding. On this Yom Kippur, I hope I am wrong. I hope I am overly pessimistic about our prospects for peace. But I don't think we've heard the last from the muftis in Tehran, the terrorists in Hezbollah or Hamas, and I don't believe we've seen any indication from the Palestinian street that they are ready to live alongside us. I pray I am wrong. And for us here in America, I fear a different kind of war, a war over the idea of Israel. This all makes me believe that we will need a doctrine of deterrence in order for Israel to continue to exist and thrive. Yet, while we will most likely be forced to carry swords in our hands, unlike God in the Midrash, we must never assume war. We can and should aspire for something more, for something better, for peace. Like Moses with Sihon, peace may be beyond the reach of our hands, but the dream of peace must live on in our hearts. We are not descendants of Esau, destined to live by the sword. We are the people of Israel. We are the people of Israel who, even when forced to send our army to fight in Gaza, we should always put down our guns to help dig out their children from the rubble. We are the people of Israel who understand the importance of the doctrine of deterrence while always holding the door open for the next Sadat to walk on through. We are the people of Israel who hold the sword out of necessity, but who seek peace out of conviction. We are the people of Israel, defenders of our land, country, and rights, and eternal pursuers of peace. I want to conclude with the following. This summer, because of the war, the conference that I attended in Israel was cut short, giving me some extra free time. I spent one full day slowly wandering through the magnificent archaeology wing in the Israel Museum. There was one discovery that captivated me: a modest display containing two small silver amulets inscribed with a quote from the Bible. The tiny silver remains are about 2,500 years old, more than 400 years older than the Dead Sea Scrolls, making them the oldest preserved copy of biblical text known. Specifically, inscribed upon the amulets are the words of the priestly blessing, the words Aaron spoke in the Sinai wilderness to bless our people. May God bless and watch over you. May God be gracious to you and show you favor. May God's countenance shine upon you. And the blessing concludes, may God grant you peace. Vayasem lecha shalom. The amulets were discovered by archaeologists in the Hinnom Valley. As some of you know, in our tradition, the Hinnom Valley, Gay Ven Hinnom, is also called Gehenna, or hell. Think about that. The oldest surviving written words from the Torah is a prayer for peace that was discovered in and ultimately lifted out of hell. And today, like in the discovery of the amulet, we are called to lift the oldest and holiest of our hopes from the hell-like reality that we face. Vayisem lecha shalom. May we continue to seek peace today, tomorrow, and always. Gamar Chatima Tova.